My daughter-in-law called 911 on me, claiming I attacked her, but her screams dissolved when the officer realized my body camera had recorded her entire performance and documented 6 months of her abusing my grandson. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. I watched her run, not in terror, but in performance. Her heels snapped against the flagstone path, and her designer purse swung wide as she pulled out her phone. The tears streaming down Vanessa's face were the only real things about her, and they were purely for effect. She was calling the police on me, a 66-year-old retired schoolteacher, claiming I had attacked her. I stood on my porch, my heart hammering a chaotic, desperate beat against my ribs. Behind me, my grandson Jay clutched the back of my skirt, a tiny, terrified anchor. I knew what was coming. The image was already printed in my mind. Me, an elderly black woman, accused of violence by a young, well-dressed socialite. The odds in that exchange were a cold, hard number, and I was losing. Yes, 911. Vanessa sobbed into the phone, her voice pitched high for the neighborhood. My mother-in-law attacked me. She's dangerous. I need help immediately. 30-42 Oak Street. I did not move. I stood perfectly still, my own silent witness. But my hand went, on instinct, to the small button-sized camera clipped to the collar of my cardigan. She might have set the trap, but she hadn't counted on the wire. 3 weeks earlier, I sat with my son, Mark, at the old kitchen table. I was calm, but the pile of photographs spread across the worn formica felt like a bomb. Look at them, Mark, I said, my voice steady, even when my jaw was locked. This is 6 months of documentation. Finger marks, a handprint on his ribs, a slap mark on his face. These happened when you weren't home. Mark's face was the color of bad milk. He was my only son, kind but afraid of being alone after losing his first wife. He wanted to believe the best in his new wife, Vanessa. She wouldn't, he whispered, tears wetting his hands. Kids fall. I pushed a picture closer. This, I said, pointing to a bruise shaped exactly like an adult thumb and fingers on Jay's upper arm, is a grab. She told Jay it was because he was being too loud. Mark finally broke. He put his head in his hands, his guilt a crushing weight. He swore he would talk to Vanessa, give her one chance to explain or seek help. My teacher's instinct screamed no, but I gave him 1 week. That was my mistake. Vanessa didn't wait a week. She arrived 3 days later, a screeching mess of expensive fury storming through my tomato patch. You meddling old witch, she shrieked. I slowly rose from my gardening stool, wiping the dirt on my apron. Good afternoon, Vanessa. You told Mark I abused Jay, she spat. Photographs don't lie, Vanessa. Bruises don't lie. That boy's fear doesn't lie. She moved close enough for me to smell her sharp perfume. I will make sure you never see Jay again. I will convince Mark you're senile, that you're dangerous. I've dealt with bullies my entire career, I told her, my voice low and solid. You don't frighten me. I will not stop protecting that child. She smiled then, the cold, cruel smile that stripped the warmth from the garden. We'll see about that, won't we, Dot? She hissed, using my late husband's nickname for me. That threat, you're senile, you're dangerous, was a blueprint. She had shown me her plan, and I realized a folder of photos would not be enough. Prepare for the worst. I drove straight to the electronics store. I bought a doorbell camera and a body camera. I became a private eye in my own home. My retirement had just become a stakeout. This afternoon, she showed up unannounced, barely an hour after I'd spotted a new bruise on Jay's thigh. A kick, he whispered, for spilling his cereal. My rage was pure. I was calling Child Protective Services tomorrow, but Vanessa had to move first. When I opened the door, Her face was a mask of strained pleasantness. Dot. Hello. I've come to pick up Jay early. I knew it was a lie, but I let her in, the small camera on my chest silently drinking in every detail. When she spotted Jay at the kitchen table, she snapped, "Let's go now." Jay's face crumbled with fear. She stomped over and grabbed his arm. "Move faster. I don't have all day." "Ow, that hurts," Jay cried out. That was it. I stepped between them, my body a solid, immovable shield. "Take your hands off him. You're hurting him." Her face contorted in a flash of pure hatred. Then she smiled that cold smile and pulled out her phone. "So this is how it's going to be, Dot. You're going to keep me from my stepson." She started walking toward me, filming everything. I stood perfectly still. Then she screamed, a sudden piercing shriek that shredded the quiet of my house. "Help! She's attacking me!" She ran out the door and into the yard, still screaming, still on the phone. I followed her, calm and slow, Jay clutching my hand. I watched her set the stage for my arrest. The stakes had just jumped from financial to public. An eternity later, 8 minutes, 2 police cars screeched to a stop. 4 officers stepped out. The lead officer, Williams, had kind, weary eyes. "Ma'am, what happened?" he asked Vanessa, who was now hysterically sobbing. "She attacked me," Vanessa shrieked, pointing. "I have video. I have proof." She shoved her phone into his hand. Officer Williams watched the quick, shaky clip on her phone, a perfect piece of manipulated theater. He turned to me, his gaze hardened. "Ma'am, I need you to step down from the porch." I did exactly as he asked, my hands open and visible. I knew I was only moments away from the steel bite of handcuffs. "Officer," I said quietly, meeting his eyes, "before you do anything, I have a doorbell camera. It shows everything from a different angle. And I have this." I tapped the small camera on my chest. "I've been recording since she arrived." Vanessa's sobs snapped off like a broken wire. The color drained from her face, leaving her ash white. Officer Williams looked at the body camera, then at my face. His suspicion was fighting his training. "You have video?" "Yes, sir. Complete continuous footage. Would you like to see it?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am, I would." I released Jay, who stayed frozen on the porch. I went inside with one of the younger officers and retrieved my tablet. When I returned, the officers gathered around me on the lawn. Vanessa crept closer, her composure gone. I pulled up the first clip. The doorbell camera showed the wide shot. Vanessa's pleasant mask. Her disdainful look at my home. It showed her grabbing Jay's arm, Jay crying out, and me stepping between them without laying a single finger on her. It showed her running outside and then screaming that I attacked her while I was still standing in the kitchen doorway. That's out of context," Vanessa stammered, her voice thin. "Then let's see this angle," I said, and pulled up the footage from the body camera. This was the close-up shot. This was the one that burned. It showed her face, cold, cruel, and powerful, as she gripped Jay's arm. It showed his cry of pain. It showed my steady intervention, never touching her. Then it showed the moment she activated her phone, her expression switching like a mask as she manufactured the screams. Officer Williams watched, his jaw tight, his weariness replaced by an icy, focused disgust. The other officers were shaking their heads. "Ma'am," he said to Vanessa, his voice a block of ice, "this video clearly shows you filing a false police report." "She edited it," Vanessa shrieked. "No, Mom," the officer corrected, calling me Mom for the first time. "This is time-stamped continuous footage. There's no editing." He looked at Jay on the porch. "Son, did your grandmother touch this lady?" Jay shook his head firmly. "No, sir. Grandma didn't touch her. Grandma never touches anybody mean." "Did Vanessa hurt you today?" Jay nodded. She grabbed my arm real hard, and this morning she kicked me because I spilled my cereal. Officer Williams knelt down, examined the fresh red marks on Jay's arm, and stood up, his face thunderous. He didn't look at Vanessa again. He looked at the other officers. Call CPS now. Vanessa started screaming for real, her performance finally dissolving into genuine panic. No! This is all a setup. Officer Williams pulled out his handcuffs. Vanessa Peterson, you're under arrest for filing a false police report. Based on the evidence, additional charges of child abuse may be forthcoming. He repeated the words, I just watched 2 separate videos that show you never being touched. What I did see was you assaulting a child and then fabricating a story to frame his grandmother. Now turn around and put your hands behind your back. She was crying now, ugly, desperate tears of loss. Watching her get handcuffed in my own front yard, my only emotion was the deep, shuddering relief that the nightmare was finally ending. Suddenly, a car screeched down the street. It was Mark. I had messaged him the moment Vanessa arrived. Come quickly. He jumped out, taking in the patrol cars, his wife in cuffs, and his son on the porch. What is going on? Mark demanded. Officer Williams intercepted him. Sir, your wife called in a false report claiming your mother attacked her. We have video evidence proving that never happened. We also have evidence of your wife physically abusing your son. Mark's face crumpled. He was broken. He hurt my son, Mark said quietly to Vanessa, who was being led away. And then you tried to frame my mother for defending him. He finally saw it. The truth he denied for years had landed on his front lawn with the flash of police lights. I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Officer Williams looked at me, his coldness now replaced with respect. Ma'am, that's some impressive documentation. You're one smart lady. I'm a grandmother, I corrected him, and there's nothing I won't do to protect my grandson. The next few hours were a whirlwind of CPS workers, statements, and documentation. I gave them my thick file, the pictures, the dates, the videos. The CPS worker, Miss Robinson, assured me the documentation was crucial. We're recommending immediate removal of the child from any environment where the stepmother has access. After everyone left, Mark sat in my living room, head in his hands. Jay was asleep, exhausted, in the guest room. I failed him, Mom, Mark whispered. No, I said firmly. You made mistakes. But you didn't fail him. You believed the evidence when you saw it. You didn't defend her when the truth came out. That's growth. The immediate threat was gone, but I still had to stand up against the dizzying, draining consequences she had unleashed. I had to secure Jay's legal future. I protected my grandson, I said, letting the words hang in the silent room. But she is going to come back for us. I know it. She will not accept losing him. Mark looked up, his eyes bloodshot with sudden panic. What do you mean, come back? Vanessa doesn't just lose, I told him. She destroys. I have the evidence for the divorce, but she'll try to turn this arrest into a custody battle. I looked at my son, his guilt and fear radiating into the dim light. I had just saved him and Jay from a monster, but I had a deep, cold certainty that Vanessa had one more, poisonous move left to play. The front door rattled on its frame, loud and sudden. I froze. It was 11:30 p.m. The front door rattled again, harder, almost violent. I grabbed Mark's arm. It wasn't Vanessa. She was in custody. But the sound was hostile, an aggressive violation of my quiet home. The officers all left, Mark whispered, leaping up. Who is that? I pulled him back. Stay. It's a trick. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed the old, heavy iron skillet. The adrenaline I thought had worn off was back, a hot, metallic taste in my mouth. I reached the front door and looked through the peephole. A tall, slick man in a cheap suit was taping a thick manila envelope to the glass. He stepped back and looked straight at the lens. A professional process server, not a threat, but a definite consequence. He didn't ring the bell again. He just walked back to his car and drove away. Mark reached the door, breathing hard. What was it? Service, I said grimly, unhooking the envelope. It was damp with the night air. I didn't need to open it to know what it contained. Vanessa's first counterattack. She had a lawyer ready. I ripped the flap. It was a petition for emergency custody. The complaint was a work of twisted fiction. Grandmother's escalating volatile behavior, delusions of abuse, and physical assault on the mother, proving a dangerous and unstable environment for the child. She had converted her false police report into a legal projectile. She filed it tonight? Mark stammered. She had this prepared, I stated, my voice cutting through his panic. This wasn't a reaction. This was Plan B. The moment she was arrested, her lawyer dropped this bomb. She's claiming you are a passive, neglectful father who allowed an unfit, senile grandmother to manipulate and abuse her. Mark sank onto the stair. Unfit. I never should have waited a week, Mom. I should have called CPS myself. No more guilt, Mark. Guilt is weakness. You have to fight this. And we start with a lawyer right now. It was too late to call a law office, but I had another asset. Mrs. Johnson, my neighbor across the street, was a retired HOA president with ironclad connections. I grabbed my jacket. Where are you going? Mark asked. To find us a lawyer, I said. Vanessa is moving fast. We move faster. I crossed the street to Mrs. Johnson's home. She answered in a pink bathrobe, a tower of gray hair, and an expression of don't you dare. Wake me unless it's a fire. I shoved the court document into her hands. She squinted at the seal, then at the details. Petition for... Oh, that witch. She thinks she can use the system against a good woman like you? I need a bulldog, Margaret. A lawyer who specializes in high-conflict custody, not one that costs my life savings. Margaret smiled, a slow, professional smile that stretched the silk of her robe. I know a woman, best in the county. She did the HOA's last big zoning fight. Name's Alice Thorne. She runs on coffee and spite. I'll call her secretary, now. Go home, Dot, and tell Mark to get his wallet ready for a retainer. I returned home, the anxiety a tight band around my chest, but with a new weapon in my hand, a name. I looked at the custody petition again. Mark had to take Jay out of the house. Now. Jay's emotional safety was more important than anything. Mark, you need to leave, I said. Take Jay to the lake house. Today. This minute. He blinked. But the hearing is next week. I can't hide him. You are not hiding him. You are protecting him. The petition claims Jay is unsafe here with me. It's a flimsy excuse to get him moved to an uncontested location, which she can then legally claim as hers once the emergency hearing starts. If you take him to the lake house, it becomes your place of uncontested residence. It cuts her leverage in half. Mark's face tightened. He was finally thinking like a fighter. But my job? Call in sick. Call in family emergency. You are on grandfather clock time now, son. Every second you stay here is a second she can exploit. Cut to verb. An hour later, Mark was waking a groggy Jay. He carried his son's small backpack and my instructions. Keep the phone on silent. Text only. Do not answer any unknown numbers. I watched them drive away, the silence in the house heavy and absolute. I felt the sharp sensory jolt of being utterly alone in a new war. I had lost my shield. My phone buzzed. The text was from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but the message was too specific. They know the cameras exist. They want them. Be ready for the motion. I stared at the screen. Vanessa's team was moving faster than I thought. They didn't just want custody, they wanted the evidence. My two most powerful assets, the body camera and the doorbell footage, were about to become the target of a court order. I could feel the cold, hard wind of legal pressure. She was trying to strip me naked before the judge. I needed to act now. The next step in this game of chess had to be the best one yet. I looked at the cameras, then at the thick envelope. The clock was ticking. I had one day until the lawyer, Alice Thorne, could see me. My first move had to be untraceable. I had to hide the evidence in plain sight. I had a one-day window before Alice Thorne, the bulldog lawyer, could meet me. I needed to move the evidence. Vanessa's team knew the cameras existed, which meant a motion to compel discovery was coming. I could not risk the raw files being seized and delayed, or worse, edited by her legal team. I pulled out my doorbell camera's micro SD card and the internal drive from the body camera. Two tiny pieces of plastic held the entire future of my family. I sat at my computer, the glow from the screen reflecting my anxiety. The raw files were too large for a simple email. I needed a ghost drive, a cloud copy that was secure, off-site, and completely invisible to any subpoena or search warrant that hit my house. I opened my account on a secure, encrypted cloud service, one I only ever used for old family recipes and tax documents. The upload bar in the corner of the screen seemed to take forever. Transferring 1.2 gigabyte. The hours slipped by, marked by the loud, rhythmic hum of the refrigerator and the frantic buzz of my own pulse. 85% complete. I thought about Vanessa, sitting in a holding cell, her expensive clothes wrinkled, her perfect nails chipped. She was driven by pure cruelty and a sense of entitlement. She had married my son for the life, not the family. Now she was losing both, and she would never forgive me for being the one to expose her. The upload finally finished, 100%. I named the folder Chocolate Chip Cookie Recipe 2025. I ejected the physical drives and placed them in a small, unmarked plastic bag, then hid them inside an old mason jar filled with dried beans in the back of my pantry. Evidence transformed into background texture. The next morning, I was the first person at the office of Alice Thorne. I was ready for a fighter, but Alice was an absolute assault vehicle. She was a small, intense woman with a voice like a file on steel. "They served you with an emergency custody petition," she said, not as a question, but as a verdict. "They're trying to move the battlefield from criminal to civil. They want the cameras. We have to file a response before noon to stop the emergency order from sticking." "I've already backed up the files to a secure location," I said, handing her the list of file names and the login information. "My house only holds the original empty memory cards." Alice stopped typing, looked up, and smiled for the first time. It was a terrifying, beautiful smile. Control flip. "You didn't just save the evidence, Dot," she said, using my nickname immediately. "You laundered it. Now they can subpoena the house all they want, and they'll find nothing but empty jars. Brilliant. That buys us a week." Line 1. I sign. Fee hits my card. Alice slid a retainer contract across the desk. I signed it without a flinch. The cost a tangible microcost that tasted of freedom. Line 2. Consequence in the world. She filed the response motion online at 11:47 a.m., killing Vanessa's emergency petition. Line 3. Antagonist pressure or a door scene jab. We won the battle, but Alice had a chilling update. Vanessa's team, they aren't using a cheap lawyer. They hired Giles and Marsh, a major corporate firm. They don't take family law, unless someone rich is paying for them. I felt a sharp sensory jolt. My husband, Samuel, had left me this house and a good pension. Mark and Vanessa had a nice life, But not Giles and Marsh money. This was not Vanessa's fight anymore. Who is paying them? I asked, the answer already clicking into place. We don't know, but there's a new name on the petition, a witness, Eleanor Vance. She's a local church elder, close friend of Vanessa's mother. The stakes escalated. Vanessa was using her arrest to call in a social debt. An outsider, Eleanor was now involved, not as a primary antagonist, but as a pressure multiplier. Eleanor would attack my reputation within my own community. I pushed back from the desk. Eleanor Vance is a respected woman. She'll testify that I'm unstable or manipulative. This is a move from financial legal to public. Exactly, Alice confirmed. She gives Vanessa the witness cred a desperate wife can't get on her own. We need to cut her off at the knees before the preliminary hearing. My blood ran cold. Eleanor knew the community. She knew I was a retired teacher. She could turn a simple custody battle into a public humiliation. I had to make Eleanor's testimony null and void before she could even speak. I needed to find the weak point in Eleanor Vance. I had 3 days to neutralize Eleanor Vance. If she testified about my reputation and stability in my own community, the family court judge would take it seriously. My strategy was simple: turn the social pressure back on the antagonist. I drove to the Church of the Good Shepherd, the place where I had taught Sunday school for decades. Eleanor Vance was the lead volunteer for the annual Harvest Supper. That was her leverage, her reputation as a community pillar. I walked past the community room where Eleanor was setting up, surrounded by other volunteers. I didn't approach her. I didn't need a confrontation yet. I needed information. I found the church secretary, a sweet, gossipy woman named Carol, at her desk. "Carol, dear," I said, leaning in, "I have to prepare for this dreadful court issue. Eleanor Vance is involved, and I remember something about the harvest supper last year. Something about the catering bill." Carol's eyes widened, a flicker of fear mixed with curiosity. "Oh, Dot, I shouldn't say anything. I need to know, Carol. I need to understand what kind of pressure Vanessa could have on Eleanor to make her lie under oath." Vulnerability ping. I was risking my dignity, making a risky ask to expose a lie. Carol leaned in, her voice a low, frantic whisper. "The caterer's bill for last year's dinner. It was $2,500. But Eleanor told the finance committee it was $14,000. She pocketed the difference. $1,500. She bought a necklace with it. Artifact mechanism, a financial discrepancy. Not enough to send her to jail, but enough to shatter her credibility as an upstanding witness. I felt a rush of adrenaline. Vanessa hadn't pulled Eleanor in to lie. She had pulled her in to pay a debt. Vanessa, being a local social climber, must have stumbled upon Eleanor's small fraud and saved it as leverage. "Thank you, Carol," I said. "You have no idea what you've done for Jay. Do you still have the original receipt for the caterer? The one for $12,500? Carol opened a locked drawer. I never threw it away, just in case. I sign, I slide, I lock. I took a photo of the receipt with my phone, the numbers clear and undeniable. I drove straight back to Alice Thorne's office. I didn't call. I walked in, slammed the receipt photo onto her desk. "Eleanor Vance has a credibility problem," I announced. "She embezzled $2,500 from the church and bought a necklace. The caterer's receipt for $2,500 proves it. Vanessa is leveraging this." Alice stared at the image, then looked up at me. "Dot, you just won the preliminary hearing. We don't need a witness. We need an antagonist demolition." Confrontation. I looked at the image of the receipt, a tiny piece of paper that held immense power. "We can't expose Eleanor in court," I mused. "It will poison the whole community against me and Jay. We have to make her silence herself." Alice nodded, A quick tactical clarity burst. She needs to feel the heat. A power flip. We don't confront her. We confront the threat she poses. That afternoon, I sent a one-line text message to Eleanor Vance, ensuring it went through a traceable number. I hope you enjoy the necklace you bought with the $1,500 from the harvest supper. The phone vibrated once. One word. No. The world narrows to a target. Her reply came almost instantly. You are mistaken. I will see you in court. I sent a second, short text attaching the image of the 12th $500 receipt and the date of the harvest supper. The real receipt is secure. Your testimony will be perjury. Stay out of this, Eleanor. For the church. I waited 10 minutes. No reply. I had put the fear of God and the law into her. The next day, Alice and I were in the small, cramped courtroom for the preliminary hearing. I saw Eleanor Vance sitting with the Giles and Marsh lawyer. She looked pale, her hands clutched so tight the knuckles were white. The judge asked the Giles and Marsh lawyer to call their first witness. The lawyer rose, adjusted his tie, and said, "We call Eleanor Vance." Eleanor stood up. She took 3 steps toward the stand. Then she stopped, turned, and walked straight out of the courtroom. Her chair scraped loudly on the marble floor. She did not look back. The Giles and Marsh lawyer gaped, his face crumpling in confusion. Alice smiled her terrifying smile. Your Honor, we move to dismiss the petition based on lack of credibility and evidence. Their key witness has literally abandoned the case. The judge was furious at the waste of time. He denied the emergency petition, but scheduled a full custody hearing for 6 weeks later. We had bought time, but Vanessa hadn't lost hope. She just lost her messenger. I knew she would escalate again, and next time it would be a direct hit. I was walking out of the courthouse, the victory feeling solid in my hands, when Alice's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, her smile vanishing. Her hand slipped on the leather case. What is it? I asked. Mark is trying to call me, she said, from the lake house, but he just sent me a text. Jay is gone. Mark's text, Jay is gone, felt like a physical punch. The courtroom victory dissolved into a sick, empty void in my stomach. Call him back, Alice. Immediately. No, she said, her voice sharp. The text came from an unknown number, same as the one that warned us about the motion to compel. If we call, we confirm the number is active and his location is compromised. Vanessa's team is monitoring everything. But Jay is missing. We don't know that, Alice snapped. Mark is panicking. He's been out of the city for days. He's not thinking clearly. We walked quickly out to the parking lot. Alice called the number from her office line, untraceable and not tied to my case. It went straight to voicemail. It's off. They took his phone. The text could be a setup to lure Mark or even me back to an exposed location. Then what do? I said, the words strained and tight. We stick to the plan, Alice commanded. Mark and Jay are at the lake house. It's isolated. If Jay is truly gone, Mark knows better than to panic. He must have a reason for that text. I took out my own phone and sent a short, coded text to Mark's burner number. Did you check the boat dock? My heart was a micro clock racing in my chest, a deadline for disaster. Mark and Jay had a secret code about the lake house boat dock, a place they would hide if they ever heard a certain word. I had to hope Mark used the code. An hour of agonizing silence passed. We were in Alice's office, pretending to work on the custody response. My hands were shaking. Then a text from Mark's number. Not there. He is with Aunt Beth. I exhaled like surf. Victory, hard-earned. Aunt Beth was Jay's real aunt, his late mother's sister who lived 2 hours north. It was a safe house and an uncontested location. Mark had used the gone text not as a cry for help, but as a covert signal that he had moved the asset. "He's safe," I whispered to Alice, the tension snapping like a breaking bone. "Mark moved him to his late wife's sister's house. This is how Mark is protecting him, by removing him entirely from the battlefield." Alice's face softened for a split second, then hardened again. "Good. Now we know two things. Vanessa or her people were monitoring his phone, and they just figured out Jay is not at the lake house. They will escalate. Escalation ladder." The stakes were moving from legal back to private, and Vanessa had tried the social route with Eleanor Vance and failed. Now she would go after my financial resources. The person paying for Giles and Marsh is not Vanessa, I reasoned. This is not a divorce. This is a hostile takeover. Someone has a financial stake in this. My money, Mark's family money. "You mentioned your late husband, Samuel," Alice prompted. "Was there a trust? A prenuptial agreement that involves Jay?" I nodded slowly. "Samuel left me the house, a good pension, and a small trust fund for Jay's college, set up by his first wife's family. It's untouchable. And Mark? Mark and Vanessa had a post-nuptial agreement 3 years ago when they bought their house. It protects his assets, but I never read the fine print." Leverage beat. Alice picked up the phone. "We need to see Mark's post-nuptial agreement. We need to know who is paying the bill for Giles and Marsh." 2 days later, Mark flew back, exhausted but resolved. He brought his post-nuptial agreement. Alice was waiting, her highlighter a lethal weapon. The moment she saw the signature block, she slammed her hand on the desk. The sound cracked through the silent room. "Look at this," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at the bottom of the last page. "Witnessed and co-signed by Eleanor Vance." "Eleanor Vance again?" I asked, confused. The church lady was just supposed to be a witness. "No," Alice corrected, her voice cold. "Eleanor Vance didn't witness the agreement. She was a co-signer. She wasn't a family friend. She was a business associate of the firm that drew up the document. She didn't sign as a favor to Vanessa. She signed as a guarantee." The truth hit me like a train. The postnuptial agreement was never about protecting Mark's assets. It was about controlling them. If Mark files for divorce, there's a liquidated damages clause. A huge multi-thousand-dollar fine Mark has to pay to Vanessa's silent partner. Eleanor was the front for the entire scheme. "No," Mark whispered. "No. I just wanted to protect Jay's inheritance." Alice pointed to a clause deep inside the document, printed in tiny aggressive type. "This is the heart of the scheme. If Mark initiates the divorce before an official finding of child abuse, he loses USD 800 in damages per day for 3 years to a holding company controlled by an anonymous party. He will be ruined." "Who is the anonymous party?" I demanded. Alice slid a new sheet of paper across the desk, a single, simple page of tax documents. "The holding company's beneficiary is listed as a trust fund. The trust fund's manager is a man named Mr. Peterson, Vanessa's father. Vanessa's father was this silent partner. He was paying for Giles and Marsh. He had used Eleanor Vance to guarantee the postnuptial agreement. This was not about love or family. It was a pure, cold-blooded financial assassination. They were trying to take control of Mark's life through a debt trap. The only way to break the USD 800 a day debt was an official legal finding of child abuse. The police report and the videos were only the first step. We needed the divorce decree to explicitly state, grounds child abuse. Mark was devastated. "She married me for money. They planned this whole thing. She never loved me." I put my hand on my son's trembling back. "You're listening now. That's what matters. We have the evidence, but we need the paperwork to stick. We need the final judge's ruling." Alice took a deep breath. "This goes from a simple divorce to a federal-level conspiracy to commit fraud and child endangerment. We have to prove the abuse was a material factor in the debt trap. I have to get my divorce papers signed, Mark said, his voice flat. She will fight it, Alice said. She will stall. She will try to leverage your guilt to make you drop the abuse charge. I looked at Mark, his face pale and resolved. The next step was the hardest one. He had to face his wife in the divorce hearing and confront the core lie he had believed. He had to push for the truth, no matter the cost. We need to file for the divorce immediately, I said, and we need to use the fact that she's arrested for false police report as our opening move. And what's the counter move? Mark asked, his voice shaking. I looked at the paperwork, then at my son, and the cold reality of the financial stake. They will try to lure you back with the promise of no financial penalty if you drop the abuse charge. She'll send a messenger, a lawyer, a friend. My phone buzzed, an email notification. I looked at the screen. The sender was Giles and Marsh. The subject line, settlement offer, divorce of Peterson, Johnson. Mark's face paled. They want to settle? I opened the document. The language was cold, direct, and predatory. Wife offers immediate uncontested divorce and waives all financial claims if and only if husband dismisses all allegations of child abuse and emotional distress and seals the arrest record. Mark was safe from the USD $800 a day payment if he simply walked away now, sealed the record, and pretended the abuse never happened. I looked at my son, his guilt warring with his responsibility to Jay. The clock was ticking, not in minutes, but in the loss of the truth. What do I do, Mom? Mark asked, a plea. You protect your son, I said simply. I reach without flinch. You don't let her seal the truth. You don't let her walk away. Mark grabbed the phone from my hand. He opened a new email. His knuckles were white. He wrote one line and hit send. I didn't need to ask what it said. I knew the price. I watched my son hit send, knowing the choice he just made cost him USD $800 a day. I watched my son, Mark, hit send. He had just rejected the settlement offer, which meant rejecting his chance to walk away clean. He had chosen the truth and Jay's safety over his financial solvency, plunging himself into the USD $800 a day debt trap set by Vanessa's father. Mark looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I failed him, Mom. 3 years I let that woman into our lives, hurting him. I didn't want to see it. You're listening now, I said, putting my hand on his back. You didn't defend her when the truth came out. That's growth. Alice and I spent the next 2 weeks preparing for the custody hearing. Vanessa, out on bail and facing the criminal charges, was stalling the divorce, using every legal maneuver to delay the official finding of abuse. Every delay cost Mark. We needed Mark to move faster. We needed to escalate the pressure. We need to expose the financial conspiracy, Alice announced. Not just the abuse. The judge needs to see the postnuptial agreement, the anonymous trust, and the USD $800 a day penalty as the motive for the false police report. This was a massive risk. We were escalating the charge from simple abuse to financial fraud with a child endangerment motive. Mark needs to file a cross-complaint, Alice explained. It won't be cheap, and it will draw the attention of Vanessa's father directly. We're aiming at the financial backer now. The new paperwork was intimidating. Mark signed it, his jaw locked. His hands were steady now, driven by the cold necessity of protecting his son. The very next day, the counter-pressure arrived. Not from a lawyer, but from the community. My phone buzzed with a notification. It was from the Church of the Good Shepherd. I opened it, and my stomach plummeted. Urgent meeting of the Finance and Community Board. Topic: Mismanagement of Harvest Supper funds. Board member Eleanor Vance has resigned, citing health. Please attend to discuss recent media attention regarding a member's involvement in child custody proceedings. Vanessa was playing her last dirtiest card, the social bomb. She knew I couldn't expose Eleanor Vance without exposing the entire church's embarrassment. By letting Eleanor resign, she shielded her front woman from criminal charges, but she left the insinuation hanging in the air that I was the reason for the church scandal. I knew the media attention was zero, but the implication was devastating. Vanessa was leveraging the church's fear of bad press against me, the retired teacher and pillar of the community. I drove to the church. I walked to the meeting room, the same room where I had laughed and celebrated for decades. The air was thick with tension and suspicion. Several of my oldest friends, the other board members, wouldn't meet my eyes. The chairman cleared his throat. "Dorothy, thank you for coming. We need to understand the nature of these custody filings, specifically the part about the false police report and the implication of a setup." I stood tall. I wouldn't allow them to frame this as my problem. I was ready for the confrontation. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. The false police report was filed against me by Vanessa Peterson after I stood in the way of her assaulting my 7-year-old grandson, Jay. "But the filing claims you are unstable," a board member, Mr. Harrison, asked nervously. "And Eleanor Vance's resignation. Are these connected?" I pulled out my phone and access to the one piece of evidence that could change the dynamics now. Not the video of the abuse, but the image of the $12,500 caterer's receipt. Eleanor Vance resigned because she was about to be exposed for embezzling $1,500 from the Harvest Supper. She was using her position to serve my daughter-in-law's financial fraud scheme against my son and grandson. I projected the image onto the small screen at the head of the table. The proof prop was on page, forcing a decision. Vanessa's family is paying a major corporate law firm, Giles and Marsh, to ruin my family financially through a predatory post-nuptial agreement. The only way to break that debt trap is an official finding of child abuse. That is what she is fighting to hide, and she is using the fear of church scandal to make me back down. I looked straight at the chairman. The only way to protect this church's integrity is to release a statement that Eleanor Vance resigned due to financial misconduct, not a health concern, and that the church fully supports my right to protect my grandson from abuse. Do not let Vanessa use our faith community as a weapon. The room went silent. I had flipped the pressure. It was no longer about my stability. It was about the church's reputation. The chairman sighed, looking defeated. "We will issue the statement, Dorothy. We will support you. We cannot be seen to condone fraud." I sign, I delete, I lock. The confrontation ended with a concrete change. My reputation was secured, and Vanessa's social bomb was diffused. I walked out feeling the quiet empowerment of knowing the truth had won again. But the financial war was still raging, and the final custody hearing was less than a month away. I knew Vanessa and her father would not simply concede defeat. They needed that legal victory, or Mark would financially ruin them with the fraud cross-complaint. I drove home, mentally prepping for the next move. Mark was calling. "Mom, the bank just flagged something," he said, his voice tense. "My business account? A major withdrawal. It says $5,000 to Giles and Marsh. Emergency retainer." "What?" "Mark, you didn't authorize that," I demanded. "No, I didn't. It's being charged to my account, but the memo says authorized by power of attorney Vanessa Peterson." My blood went cold, not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of the betrayal. She was still financially draining him, even from jail, and she had access to his money. I realized the postnuptial agreement was much more sinister than just a debt trap. It was a hidden financial kill switch. Lie. The unauthorized $5,000 withdrawal, billed directly to Mark's business account and paid to her lawyers, was the signal that Vanessa still held a hidden financial kill switch. I rushed back to Alice's office, the transaction receipt burning a hole in my hand. She's not just in debt, she's in his wallet. How could she use a power of attorney for a business account? Alice pulled up Mark's bank records. The postnuptial agreement wasn't just a debt trap, Dot. It was a sleeper contract. Look at this clause. Temporary business operations power of attorney, activated upon filing of separation papers, allowing one-time emergency withdrawals up to $5,000 for unforeseen legal fees. She planned this down to the dollar, I muttered. Worse, Alice said, her voice dropping. The power of attorney can be revoked only by a judge's order, and only after the divorce is finalized. She can continue to bleed his business dry, $5,000 at a time, until the final decree. We had less than 3 weeks until the custody hearing, which would decide the divorce grounds. Mark was hemorrhaging money and losing ground on his business. The micro cost was visible. Every day we delayed, his financial safety slipped further away. I looked at Alice. There has to be a way to override a power of attorney. What about the criminal charges? That's our only leverage, Alice confirmed. Vanessa is still in legal trouble for the false police report and the pending charges of child abuse and endangerment. We need the prosecutor to move on the criminal case before the family court hearing. If she's officially charged with child abuse, it automatically voids any contracts pertaining to the child's best interest, including that predatory power of attorney. New pressure. I had to convince the district attorney's office, a massive bureaucratic machine, to prioritize a suburban domestic case. I called Officer Williams. He was the kind, steady man who had seen the whole video. I risked one line of vulnerability. Officer Williams, I said, I need your help. Vanessa's family is using a financial scheme to drain my son and delay the divorce. She still has access to his bank account. We need the prosecutor to move now on the criminal charges, or Mark will lose his business. Officer Williams was quiet for a long moment. Ma'am, I saw your videos. I saw what she did to that boy. I saw what she tried to do to you. I'll make some calls to the DA's office. I can't promise anything, but I can make sure your documentation gets a second look. I call, he answers, he moves. That was all I needed. 2 days later, the DA's office called Alice. They were ready to move on the criminal charges, not for the false police report, which was the least of it, but on the child abuse and endangerment. My detailed documentation, the 6 months of photos, dates, and Jay's own words, was the weapon. Vanessa's lawyers from Giles and Marsh must have been panicked. They were corporate defense, not criminal defense. The financial scheme was about to unravel. The pressure worked. They immediately proposed a plea deal. Alice called Mark and me to her office. They are offering an immediate divorce settlement, uncontested, and they will formally revoke the power of attorney. In exchange, Vanessa gets 5 years probation, mandatory anger management, and a permanent restraining order from Jay. But they want to plead to endangerment, not abuse. It's a technical difference, but it saves her father the exposure of the fraud charge. The choice was agonizing: immediate safety and financial solvency, or the harder fight for full justice against her father's financial fraud. Mark looked at me. She'll still have a criminal record. She can never come near Jay again. The power of attorney is gone. My business is safe. And the truth? I asked. Does she admit to the abuse on the record? Alice checked the document. Yes, the plea requires her to admit the facts of the incidents we documented: the grab, the push, the slap, the kick. The court will make an official finding of fact on the abuse. It wasn't a perfect victory. Her father, Mr. Peterson, would escape the fraud charges, but the financial kill switch would be destroyed, and Jay would be legally and permanently protected. Take the deal, Mark, I said. Protect your son. That's what matters. We win custody, we end the financial bleeding, and we secure Jay's peace. Mark nodded, relief flooding his face. He signed the plea deal. I exhaled like surf. Victory. Hard earned. Vanessa signed the divorce papers and the plea deal. The divorce was finalized in record time, citing the finding of fact on the abuse incidents. The power of attorney was revoked. The USD $800 a day debt was destroyed. Mark drove to the lake house to bring Jay home. I was alone in my kitchen, finally feeling the fear I had suppressed for weeks. What if she had succeeded? The thought of being arrested, of Vanessa winning. It was terrifying. The phone buzzed. It was Mark. Mom, we're coming home. Jay has something to tell you. I felt a sudden, sharp dread. Mark's tone was too quiet. What had Vanessa done in her final act? Jay has something to tell you, Mark had texted. The dread was a bitter pill in my mouth. Vanessa had been silent since the plea deal. This had to be her final, unseen attack. Mark and Jay arrived late that evening. Jay, my bright, warm grandson, ran into my arms. He was smiling more now, less withdrawn. Grandma, guess what? He chirped, holding a piece of paper. I got an A on my spelling test again. That's wonderful, baby, I said, hugging him tight. Mark was standing in the doorway, his expression heavy. He held out a small, folded piece of thick paper. This was stuck to the front door of the lake house, he said, his voice low. It's from Vanessa. She must have dropped it off right before she left town. I opened the note. It wasn't a legal threat. It wasn't a demand for money. It was a single, spiteful, typewritten sentence. You may have won the battle, old woman, but you lost the war. Ask Mark where he was the night you had your heart scare. My hand started shaking, not from fear, but from the realization of the new front she had just opened. This was the final, devastating move. The note was designed to plant doubt and betrayal between Mark and me, a red herring to turn us against each other. 3 years ago, I had a health scare. It was a stressful time after Samuel passed, and I ended up in the emergency room overnight. Mark came straight to the hospital the next morning. I looked at Mark, his face pale with sudden panic. What is she talking about? Mark looked down, shuffling his feet. Shame settled on his face. Mom, it was the night you went to the hospital, he confessed, his voice barely audible. Vanessa was furious I was leaving her alone to come to you. I stayed out that night. I was supposed to be at the hospital, but she convinced me to go to a bar with her first. I thought I only missed an hour. You weren't with me, I said, the memory shifting, darkening. I was alone all night. You came at 8 a.m. I just assumed you were with me. He put his head in his hands. I was being bad, Grandma, he mumbled, echoing Jay's words from months earlier. I was being selfish. I was afraid of being alone again. I let her twist me. I told her I was afraid of losing her too. This was Vanessa's last act of pure cruelty. The abuse was physical. This was emotional sabotage. She had leveraged Mark's fear of abandonment and his new marriage to make him neglect his own mother in a crisis. Now, she was using it to make me doubt his love. Vulnerability ping. I was risking trust by asking the question. Mark, I said, my voice heavy with the weight of the memory. Was that the first time you chose her over me? Over Jay? Yes, he admitted, his shoulders falling. It was the first time I realized how much I wanted her approval, how much I wanted the marriage to work. I minimized her manipulation. I wanted to believe the best in her. I sat next to him on the sofa, putting my hand on his shoulder. She saw your weakness, son. She didn't love you. She saw a target. She saw someone who could be manipulated into defending her because he was scared of being alone. The final victory wasn't just the legal paperwork. It was Mark's full clarity. He had faced his guilt, his fear, and his biggest mistake. "What do I do now?" he asked, the echo of his earlier question returning. But now the connotation had shifted from fear to resolve. "You protect your son," I said, using the leitmotif line one last time. "You rebuild. You start by making new traditions, with Jay and with your mother." Mark filed a restraining order on behalf of Jay, securing the court's decree that Vanessa was never to have contact with the child again. 3 months passed. Mark was going to therapy and to church with me again. Jay was in play therapy and healing. The community had rallied around us. Officer Williams even stopped by, off duty, just to check in. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, standing on my porch, "I've seen a lot of false accusations, but I've never seen someone handle it the way you did. Your documentation saved yourself and possibly your grandson." "I'm a grandmother," I corrected him again. "That's what grandmothers do." I sat alone on my porch that evening, watching the sunset. I realized the full cost and the full victory. Vanessa thought she could use the system, the church, and the financial schemes against me. She thought my age meant weakness, but I was a retired teacher. I knew how to document, how to stand firm, and how to prepare for the worst. Vanessa saw an old woman. She should have seen a warrior. I had one final resonant thought, a full circle on the betrayal. Jay, my grandson, had finally come to me and said the words that made every sacrifice worth it. One afternoon, 3 months after the divorce was final, Jay and I were in my kitchen, making his favorite chocolate chip cookies. He was standing on his step stool, carefully dropping chips into the batter, his small face scrunched in concentration. "Grandma," he said suddenly, looking up at me. "Yes, baby?" "Thank you for protecting me. From Vanessa. You saved me." I stopped stirring and pulled him into a hug. Love. "Baby, that's what grandmas do," I promised him. "We protect. We love. We fight for our babies no matter what." He hugged me tighter. "I'm not scared anymore," he whispered, "because I know you'll always keep me safe." Those words nearly broke me. To know that this child felt safe again, that was the payoff promise. The next evening, Mark came by to pick him up. He looked lighter. He was slowly, surely, rebuilding his life and his relationship with his faith. "Mom," he said, standing in my kitchen, "I've been thinking. Would you be okay if we had Sunday dinner here every week, like we used to? Just the 3 of us?" I smiled. "I'd love that, son. And we'll start some new traditions with Jay. Build some happy memories to replace the bad ones." He gave me a tight, grateful hug. "Thank you, Mom, for everything. For seeing what I couldn't see. For saving my son. Our son." I corrected him gently. "He's our family, and family protects family." After they left, I sat on my porch, watching the last of the sunset. This was the same porch where I had stood calmly while Vanessa tried to destroy me. I thought about all the grandmothers out there who are dismissed as meddling or overprotective. Vanessa had thought the system would believe her, a young, pretty, well-spoken white woman. Over me, a 68-year-old black woman. She thought the optics alone would win. She was wrong. She underestimated the power of the truth, the power of documentation, and the power of a grandmother's love. She called the police on me, expecting them to arrest me. But when Officer Williams saw the real video, the truth won. And instead of me in handcuffs, it was her. Justice doesn't always work out like that. I know how easily this could have gone differently. I know how many people don't get believed, But this time, it worked. This time, the truth won. This time, the grandmother won. And the child was saved. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Jay wants to know if he can spend Saturday night at your house. He wants to help you plant tomatoes. I smiled and texted back. Tell him I'll have his room ready, and we'll plant the tomatoes together. I put down my phone and looked out at my garden, the same garden where Vanessa had made her first threat. My tomatoes were thriving. My flowers were blooming. Life was continuing, beautiful and persistent, just like me, just like my family. I'm still here, still protecting, still loving, still being exactly what I've always been, a grandmother who will stop at nothing to keep her babies safe. She learned the hard way that in the end, love wins, and grandmother's wisdom wins. Tomorrow, Jay will come over. We'll plant tomatoes, make cookies, and just be family. And I'll keep protecting, keep loving, keep documenting if necessary. I wouldn't have it any other way. The end. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.